All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending this Train the Trainer session. Just to be sure it's still working, please let me know if you can hear me and see my screen real quick. Okay, I see those indications. Okay, great. All right. So today's Train the Trainer session is for RMS administrators. Thank you for attending. If you have any questions throughout today's session, please go ahead and type that question into the Q&A area on this WebEx. We do have some RMS Support Center folks on standby ready to take care of those as they come in. We'll also have some time throughout the presentation where I'll pause and ask if you have any questions that need answering, and you'll be able to unmute when we do that to ask your questions then if you prefer to do that. The slides for this presentation can be found on our website, rms.usafe.army.mil. That link is also available on the references slide in this presentation, along with some other helpful links for our YouTube channel, the help desk contact information, and the KM portal link. There may be some minor updates in these live slides, but we'll make sure that the most updated slides are added to the website within the next few days following this training. Any Q&A and or discussion held during this training is also going to be added at the end of the slides once the training has concluded as well. This session is also being recorded, and the video will be posted to our YouTube channel within the next few days after the training, with demonstrations added to that final YouTube video. Okay, so let's get started. So here we have some preliminary guidance for how to take in this type of training, that being the Train the Trainer course. The course is designed and intended for district administrators. There aren't really any prerequisites for this course, but attendees are expected to be really familiar with navigating through RMS, entering data, and pretty good knowledge of the governing regulations that drive that. Attendees should also expect to gain a deeper understanding of how RMS works, why RMS works the way it does, and gain insight on how to teach other fellow RMS users. This training can also be used as a resource for internal district training. Okay, here's our agenda for today's session. First, we'll do a recap of all of the recent patch updates. Then we'll move into the primary topics for this session, which is going to be a review of the preparation that needs to be completed for new contracts. We'll look at that preparation in the district and office level, and then also at the contract level. And after that, we'll open up the floor for any discussions or questions to take place. Okay, first up is going to be our recap. We're going to be reviewing some significant updates in the recent patch releases for patch 444, patch 453, 466, and 470. We're not really reviewing all of the updates made in these patches. All of those release notes are viewable on our website, so if you have further questions regarding each patch, check those out. So starting with patch 444, this is an update to the contract status module. A new COR comments tab was added here so that field offices could have an area to type in notes for reporting on the status of the contract with as much or little text as needed. This is an area of free entry, and it's not going to show on any reports, but this information may be useful to pull into other reports regarding the status of the contract. To access this tab, you'll need the read and write access to the phase-status/issues tab in the contract status permissions in order to see and use this field. Next, still in patch 444, was an update to the import-export tab to be what used to be the NAS-SDEF module. So XML files can now be imported into this module, and because of that, the module's title was also updated to just be a network analysis schedule, and that's it. And the description for that module was updated to include the verbiage for XML files. So RMS now allows the import of both P6 XML and SDEF files. The process of adding an XML file versus an SDEF file is going to be pretty much the same. You'll need to get the request to import approved, and then move forward in the same way you would with an SDEF file. Next, still in patch 444, was an update to the warranty tracking area in contractor mode. These fields down here at the bottom were still editable in contractor mode, and that was fixed. So these fields are government entry only. So from now on, well, from the release of this patch, in contractor mode, these ratings will be visible when they're entered by the government, but they will not be able to be edited. Okay, real quick, I think we just have this one patch 453 update to review. This was an update made to progress payments in this release within the obligations tab. The maximum retainage percentage that can be set for an obligation is now capped at 10%, and only 6 decimal places can be entered within this field. So if you're out of bounds in either way with those values entered in this field, RMS is going to let you know by highlighting the field in red and providing an error message when you hover over it with your mouse. Okay, moving on to patch 466. There was an update to the contract status module. This is specifically related to status photos. So when the is current status photo checkbox is unchecked for a photo, that photo's preview is now going to be removed from this section up here. And in the contract menu, now that picture has been removed, that will default back to the original default contract photo that shows when you first add the contract, instead of showing this preview. Next, also in patch 466, is an update to the modification reason code selection for contract changes. This update is to include segmented versions of the original differing site conditions code, number 7, shown up here. That code's now been split into 2 different codes, 7I, differing site conditions, -type 1 schedule, and 7 or 7.1, and then 7.2, differing site conditions, -type 2, unknown physical conditions. In RMS's background program data, the 7 reason code, the original reason code, is going to be kept in data tables so that any modifications entered before the date of this patch release can still be sorted by that code, but the original 7 reason code as shown up here will not be available for selection in RMS. Okay, next, we did have a few updates that were made within the contract changes views. This first one was reverted, and that was the removal of the BCD button. That we did put it back. That was reverted. So that button was returned in the hotfix patch 470, and that's about all we have to say about patch 470 for that one. Now, an update we did keep as part of those contract change views updates was the change request package tab. This tab replaced the previously named supporting documents tab for change requests that were created after the release of patch 466. Any change requests created before that will still have the supporting documents tab, but any newer ones will have the change request package tab. The new change request package tab is going to contain a grid to add supporting documents to the change request, as well as an area for document package to be created down there at the bottom. The supporting documents that can be added are limited to correspondences, RFIs, and QA or QC narratives. When a BCD is created for the change in the status/funding tab, the BCD is going to automatically be added in a newly created document package down in that bottom section. Completing that document package will be determined by district policy, so refer back to that for that guidance. Documents within the document package can be copied to a modification once the change request is ready for linking to a mod. The supporting documents will not be included in that copy function, but any documents in the document package will be able to be copied into a mod. Next, for patch 466, we also had an update for contract modifications, specifically the mod package requirements. The contract action report is no longer required to be part of the mod package in order for the mod to be completed in RMS. The SF30 will still be required, so just make sure to follow your district policy as it relates to the required documentation for modifications. However, RMS will no longer force an item to be marked as that contract action report in the mod package for those modifications to be completed. Okay, also in patch 466, to fix an error that was occurring in the milestone schedule module, entry into this module has been updated to force a phase selection every time a user enters the milestone schedule module for contracts with multiple phases. When a phase is selected, that phase's data will be shown while inside the module, and then when leaving and re-entering the view, a phase selection will be required again. Like I said, this is for contracts with multiple phases. If the contract doesn't have multiple phases, then the usual view for the contract milestone is going to be displayed instead, without the phase selection required. Okay, another update to the milestone schedule module in patch 466 was a new field that was added to display the option duration. When a modification is made to the contract and that modification impacts the duration of the contract, that new duration is going to show in this new option duration field. Also, the original date for the contract required completion milestone is no longer going to change the original date shown here, with the modifications for reason codes I, incremental definitization of work, and 5, contract options. Okay, and finally, our last patch update to cover is for the document package export module. The cancel export button shown here was added so that you could cancel an export while it's in progress. And also added as part of this is the export progress bar that now shows in the bottom corner while you have an export in progress. This is going to show the percentage of the completion for the export until it's been completed. You can even leave the export screen and this will continue to show wherever you are in RMS until the export's done. Please do keep in mind that while an export's in progress, as you can see, these checkboxes are going to be disabled and no further selections are going to be able to be made in that screen until the export's done. Okay, so that concludes our recap of the recent patch release updates. We do have videos on YouTube of those previous trainings where we covered all of the updates and most of the updates in the patch releases. And then, like I mentioned earlier, all of those release notes can be found on our website. So if you have any further questions on those, please check out those videos and release notes. Links to those videos can be found on the references slide of this presentation. So now we will get started with the topics for today's Train the Trainer session. Here's the list of items that we're going to be covering in today's training. We're going to look at the district and office level contract prep and the contract level contract prep. Also, as part of today's presentation, I'm going to touch on the permissions that are necessary to access and or update the information and settings that we review today. So starting at the district and office level, these are the topics we'll cover for this level. We'll look at the prime contractor entry, adding a contract to RMS, preparation for P2 linking at the district and office level, local office milestones, QA/QC and Submittals Setup at this level, work categories for schedules that need to be used for contracts, document packages, and user roles and rights / staff records. So first up will be entering a prime contractor for the first time. So before a prime contractor can be assigned to a contract, they first must be added to the district. The information added here in the district office is added to the RMS database. Once the prime contractor is entered in the RMS database, the prime contractor can then be added to individual contracts. This is only going to be available to those with at least partial district administrator rights, and at a minimum, as part of those rights, they'll need the district office prime contractor permission assigned. In the prime contractor module within the district office, a list of all of the prime contractors available to be added to contracts will be found here. In this list, you'll be able to see the prime contractor ID, name, UEI number, cage code, and city and state for each one. So to add to the list and begin the prime contractor setup at this level, you'll just click on the Add button and enter a name for the prime contractor, which will become the short name, quote unquote, for the contractor, as we can see in this screen. So contractor short name, that title entered in that initial prompt is going to be shown there. Some of this information has to be filled out before the prime contractor is added to a contract rather than within the district. While some information may be entered within the contract itself by the contractor, like the home office information. However, please note that any information entered at the contract level after the prime contractor has been added to a contract, that information is not going to be backfilled into the district office prime contractor view. So please keep that in mind. It will carry, if it's entered at the district level, then that will carry over into the contract level, but it will not work the other way around. So the UEI number, the cage code, and the NAICS code, or the North American Industry Classification System code, will be entered here if it's available. And at the bottom of the screen, any contract linked to the prime contractor will be listed here. Also in the contractor staff tab right here, contractor staff can be added, edited, or deleted for the prime contractor. The government should definitely enter the first contractor staff member in there, and they should be added as an admin so that any further information and contract staff settings can be added by them upon completion of the prime contractor setup here at the district level. If you need assistance finding prime contractor information, SAM.gov will be able to provide that most likely. You can search on the site for the contractor entity and information. The contractor organization does need to be currently registered in SAM.gov with either an active or inactive registration. Okay. Moving on from the district prime contractor setup, we'll look at going ahead and adding a contract to RMS. So first things first, please make sure that you are following any procedures that are already determined by the office or the district. Also check the contract specifications for the contract as it relates to the use of RMS contractor mode. That section should be 014500.1510 or equivalent. Also, please know that there are different forms of construction, which is dependent on the type of contract that's awarded. Future contracts are loaded based on the project management plan, and after contract award, that fully executed award can be used to load cleanse and set up the contract finances within RMS. So to add a contract in RMS, you'll click on the Add button in the contract selection view as shown here. This is the permission that will be needed to do that. When you add the RMS contract, add RMS contract window will appear for you to enter a title for the contract and select an office under which the contract will be added. If there is another contract somewhere in RMS that can be used to replicate data from, that data can be copied from another contract using the copy data from another contract checkbox. If you select this checkbox, another lookup is going to appear for you to select the contract to copy from. Real quick, I want to touch on this note down here at the bottom. This add button is only going to show up if you have the display contracts radio button selected and there aren't any filters set that may avoid you from seeing the contract. This text up here should let you know what type of list of contracts you're seeing. So in this case, we're seeing all contracts, but if you had it filtered down to future or it would show all future contracts and so on. Okay, and once that add RMS contract screen has been passed, the contract is going to be opened up to the default contract menu view within that newly added contract. Okay, next we are going to look at the P2 linking at the office level. So first, a little background on how P2 and RMS work together. Primavera is the planning tool that houses the P2 projects and their projected contract requirements. So Primavera is the source from which P2 project data is pulled into RMS, and after contract award, RMS will be the source for further actual and projected contract dates that occur during the contract. The relationship between P2 and RMS can vary. You can have a one-to-one linking between a single P2 project source and a contract in RMS. And you can also have a single P2 project source linked to multiple contracts in RMS. However, the caveat with that situation with a single P2 source linked to multiple contracts in RMS is that when this is the case, the multiple contracts that single P2 number is associated to in RMS need to have different WBS ID or task codes for each contract that's being linked. Otherwise, P2 linking will not work properly for a single P2 project source to multiple contracts in RMS if it is not set up that way. For each contract that is associated to an RMS, the task code or WBS ID need to differ. For two projects to be associated to a single contract, the WBS ID and task code also have to be different in RMS under the same contract. So if an office needs to be associated with a P2 project task org codes, that can be performed in the local office module for those who have the correct permissions. The permission for that is going to be at the office administrator rights level, and at a minimum, those who need access to this will need the office description and P2 projects permissions granted within their rights. To associate P2 org codes with an office, go to the local office module, select the appropriate office you need to set or think you need to set, and go to the office description module. So please remember that any office can be selected in the district, but if you're trying to set the P2 org for an office, preferably this should be done on an office that does not already have it set. It's not really preferred to overwrite anything like this that could affect things in the future. Also, please keep in mind that this information does come loaded from CFMs. RMS does not control what shows here for the P2 org codes. If there was a P2 update before the nightly download, you can click on the Update Orgs button right here, and that's going to bring in any current updates immediately rather than having to wait after the nightly download and wait until the next day. Okay, so in P2, the RMS codes need to be associated with the project in question. The status of the project in P2 must be open or active. It cannot be closed. And also, you have to be sure that the resources amount in P2 is greater than 1 cent. If the resource amount in P2 is only at 1 cent or less, RMS will ignore the project. So make sure that that is over 1 cent. Once the contract is awarded, RMS will stop pulling information out of P2 and then begin pushing specific field data of information to P2 as the contract progresses. Okay, moving on from P2, we'll now look at the local office milestone setup. Specific milestones may need to be added to every contract in your office based on whichever milestones are determined in the contract schedules, requirements, or elsewhere. These are the different types of milestones that show in this module. You can add, edit, and delete from this view. And then, of course, there are sort tiles at the top, which allow you to sort based on the type of milestone. It happens to be like designer construction or post-construction. In this view, you're going to see both local and system milestones. So please note that the system milestones can only be viewed. Those can't be edited, changed, or deleted. Those are just pretty much there for your reference. To access this area, partial office administrator rights with the milestone event permission assigned will be required at a minimum. Of course, if you're a full office admin, you'll be able to access this. To add a new milestone, you can either create a new one entirely, or you can copy from another office, as shown here. This is that process. When adding a new milestone, different settings like choosing the coordinating phase for the milestone, recording the event time, adding this to all new contracts, etc., can be configured in that Edit Local Milestone screen. Settings for the listed milestones can also be edited in the grid by using the checkboxes available here. If milestones need to be added at the district level in this way, this can be done in essentially the same way, only that's going to be in the district library menu instead. For this action, partial district admin rights will be required, and the district library district milestones permission will need to be assigned at a minimum to add those district level milestones instead. Moving on to the QA/QC setup at the district and office level. To prep for QA/QC setup on a contract, we'll look at the office policy here for QA daily reports. This office policy module can be found in the local office menu, and it allows you to set the QAR lock policy. So you can specify which QA reports can be edited beyond their completion. Sometimes an error needs to be resolved on a QA daily report, but the lock policy doesn't allow for any necessary edits to be made, and so that can be changed here if needed. If you choose the only allow editing of daily reports created within X days of the most recently QA daily report, you'll be able to specify a certain number of days after the most recently completed report through this text field that appears for that option. To be able to access this for an office, partial office administrator rights with the local office policy permission assigned will be required at a minimum. Again, if you're a full district or office administrator, you will be able to access this. If needed, different types of reports can be added for QA/QC in the district in the QA/QC reports module within the district library menu. So this is a district admin function only. So at a minimum, partial district administrator rights with the QA/QC reports permission must be assigned to make any actions here. When a report type is added, The QA and QC narrative titles will also be added here. You can use the add button in that grid as shown here. When you add a dredge report type, however, only QC narrative titles can be added. The narratives listed here will show in the narrative title lookup for that report type. So make sure that these are entered. Otherwise, when a user goes to create this report type, there will be no narrative titles to choose from for that report. So
for this demonstration, we have RMS open in government mode in the contract selection view. And from here, we'll go to the district library menu. Within the district library menu, select the QA/QC reports module. In this module, different report types can be created for QA/QC reports and can be used by the district. To add one, click on the Add button. And in the Add Report Type screen, you can select the report type. These are all of the options available. For this demonstration, I'll just stick with the Civil QA/QC report and enter a title. Click OK to confirm. And you'll be presented with this screen where, if needed, you can update the report title previously entered. And you can add QA and QC narrative titles for the report type. To add a QA narrative title, in the QA narrative titles tab, click on the Add button, enter a title, update the order number if needed, and if this QA narrative is safety related, check on this checkbox. Click OK to confirm, and perform the same steps in the QC narrative titles tab. Again, if needed, update the order number and check the safety related checkbox if needed. So now this report type has a QA and a QC narrative. Keep in mind that if you create a report type and no narrative titles are added for the report type, when a user goes to create that report in a contract, they will have no narratives to select from. So please make sure you add those. I'm going to add another one real quick. And this one's going to be a dredge report type. So I'll click on the bucket/pipeline dredge QC report type and update the title. In the dredge report type, you'll notice that there's only one tab, and that's because only QC narrative titles can be added for dredge report types. And this will work the same way as previously. Enter a title, update the order number, and check the safety related checkbox if needed.
Moving on from QA/QC prep, we'll now look at how to prep for submittals at the district level. First up, in the district office menu, and then in the district policy module within that menu, the submittal policy tab is going to allow you to set defaults for contracts within the district as it relates to review and resubmittal periods. These are just default values, so they can be changed within a contract if that is necessary. The contract will just start off with these values set. To access this area, partial district administrator rights with the district office district policy permission needs to be assigned at a minimum. Submittal types can also be added for use by contracts within the district. That's going to be done in the district library, submittal types module. In that module, the submittal types can be added as desired, and some can be edited or deleted. There are some standard submittal types which are built into RMS. and those will be signified with the system dash standard use slide entry type. Those cannot be edited or deleted. Again, those are just there for your reference and so that you can see them, but those cannot be messed with. If you're deleting a user-created submittal type, please make sure you do that with caution. Make sure that it's not already in use by a contract that's already in progress. That could have some negative impacts if you delete something in that instance. To access this area, partial district administrator rights with the district library submittal types permission will need to be assigned at a minimum. Also in the system library menu, this is really just for reference. The specification sections module is going to show all of the electronic formats for specification sections that are available for use in RMS. To be able to access this, users will also need at least partial district administrator rights with the specification sections permission granted. Yeah, again, that's at a minimum. If you are a full district administrator, then you'll be able to access this with ease. The site listed there will take you to the Unified Facilities Guide Specification sections where further information on the electronic specification format can be found. Next, we'll review the district office or the office prep as it relates to schedules for contracts within the district. If a contractor is importing their activity schedule through an SDEF file and the work categories in that SDEF file are not listed in this module in RMS, then those work categories in the SDEF file are not going to be recognized and imported into RMS as part of that schedule. These codes can be entered for individual activities within the pay activities module of a contract, but the drop-down selection for those codes is going to pull from the activities, from the work codes in this module, work category codes in this module, sorry. To access this area, partial district administrator rights with the district library work categories permission need to be granted to be able to access that. Once all the necessary work categories have been added, as shown here, make sure to notify the contractor of this so that they know that all of the codes are in there and they can correctly import their schedule and match these work category codes. Okay, moving on from schedules, we'll now review some document package setups that will be required, that will be prepared in the district office level. So first up, document signature positions can be created here in the district library, and these are used to sign documents within document packages. And these can be created and edited in this document signature positions module. This is a quick overview of the parameters that can be set within those document signature positions. You can specify the position and the page number for the signature being added, as well as the type of signature it is, government, contractor, or shared between the two. To make this a default signature for the district, click on the Make Default button. Okay, also in the document signature position selection view, all of the signature positions in the district are listed here. So there are also some that cannot be edited or deleted, and those are listed here. We have some standard location type positions, and then there are also fixed positions that are programmed directly into RMS. These can also not be edited or deleted by any user. All right, next up is the RMS staff and user roles and rights information. So any user will be able to access their own staff record, but they may not be able to make any updates to the staff record unless their permissions say otherwise. So this is only the case for CAC login users as well. Non-CAC login users will not be able to access the RMS staff area at all. So to be able to assign contract user roles to staff records within the associated office, users will need partial office administrator rights with the assign user roles - office permission granted at a minimum. Of course, if there are full office administrator rights, they will be able to. However, they will not be able to add the staff record itself or link the staff record to login. That will only be for full district administrators. So those who have partial district administrator rights with the assign user roles permission granted, it'll be the same thing for the office. They will be able to add or edit user roles within existing staff records, but they won't be able to add or link staff records for login. So full district administrators are definitely the key users when it comes to creating and linking staff records. They will have full capability to do everything that's necessary to get that done. Okay, so when adding a staff record, you'll begin by typing in the RMS ID for the user. If the user will be working with sending payments to CFUMs, it is very, very important that their RMS ID matches their login credentials in the CFUMs database for the contract. Usually that's going to be their UPass ID, all in caps. And this is important because if their RMS ID does not match what is in CFUMs, they won't be able to send payments to CFUMs from within RMS for this district. The RMS IDs are also case sensitive in CFUMs, so please ensure that it's entered correctly in RMS as well so that it can be recognized going both ways. For users without a CAC, you'll enter a unique alphanumeric identifier as the RMS ID. Also, please note that the RMS ID cannot be changed once it's been entered for a staff record. So please keep that in mind whenever you're entering that in for a new one. And then after you get past the add staff member screen, you can continue to fill out their staff record with their name, abbreviated name, work phone, etc. So the work email address that we've highlighted here, that is only really required for non-CAC logins, but it is best practice to enter this email address for CAC holders as well for record-keeping purposes. The next section of the staff record is for the user's assigned office and position title. The same goes for these selections. You will, to be able to edit this, partial office or district administrator rights with the assigned user roles permission granted will be required to make updates to these fields at a minimum in the staff records for the associated office or district. Okay, and right here, this slide reviews the checkboxes available for the staff records listed there. We've got the inactive staff member checkbox, which we recommend using rather than deleting the user, because this may impact any existing data input by that user. The support staff member from another district/division/HQ. Check this for a use-based employee with a CAC who doesn't really belong to any district. Will this person be a district POC for RMS/QCS tech support? Check this box to identify this user as a resource to be used for tech support by the district. There's also a checkbox for receiving emails from the RMS Center. And finally, no access to government estimate on change request register. Check this to restrict the user's access, essentially as it says there. It is always a good idea to have a signature block for users. So along with signing, certain staff lookup fields need that signature block to find the user in RMS. So this is showing adding that here. And like we said, it's definitely recommended and a good way to go for a staff record. In the box at the bottom of a staff record, district administrator rights can be granted fully or restricted by only selecting the desired checkboxes. So as I've been mentioning the permissions throughout the slides, if this full district administrator rights radio button is selected, all of these are going to be checked, and like it says, they're going to have full district administrator rights. If the user only needs read-only access to the district, this can be accomplished by using the district-wide read-only checkbox, which we'll review in a later slide. Okay, in the next section, this is where the office administrator rights can be granted for the staff record. The methodology here is the same for selecting administrative permissions for the office as it would be for the district. You can either select full office administrator rights to check all of those boxes and grant them all the permissions, or you can select the selected office administrator rights radio button and just make individual selections in those permissions below. To get all of these offices to show up, you will need to check the Show All Offices button or checkbox, and then select the office. And once the selections have been made, if it's only selected permissions, that's going to show as a partial office admin. And then if they are a full office administrator right, it's going to show as a full office admin. I do want to specifically touch on this office summary reports checkbox right here. Using this permission is going to allow the office admin to see summary reports, but only for the associated office only, not at the district level. So keep that in mind. So I've kind of touched on some of this already. Typically, the district administrator adds, edits, and deletes contract user roles in RMS. The district administrator can have the contract user role read-write permission for all contracts in the district. Office administrators with the same read-write permission for all contracts attached to their office and have no access to contracts at other offices unless otherwise provided. Any user with the assign user roles-office permission can assign user roles inside the contracts where the office is given in, and any user can be given district-wide permission with the assign user roles-district or contract user roles permission. Please check with your district for any questions about this process or the contract user role process. So, the contract rights. This is the third box at the bottom to grant users access to contracts by office or district-wide. Access can be granted to all contracts within an office, groups of contracts, or individually selected contracts. When you're assigning these rights, a user role must be selected for any access to be granted to the user. If no user role is assigned, no rights will be granted. If a user is granted access to the entire district, you can select this, as I mentioned earlier, district-wide radio button, but again, you will also have to select a user role for the user to get those permissions granted to the user. After a selection is successfully made, it's going to signify that by putting the user role title here in whichever office or district is selected here. So if you exit out of there and there's no user role listed here, then this user has not been granted any access. You'll need to make sure that the user role is entered or selected. Okay, one of the last required steps for a staff record is going to be to link the staff record to a login method. The link staff record button will be for CAC login users, and when you use this, you'll be prompted to enter the user's DOD ID on the back of their CAC. If for any reason that 10-digit DOD ID number doesn't work, then you can try using the 15-digit number also found on the back of the CAC beneath the barcode. If that does not work, contact the help desk. There might be something awry. For non-CAC login users, a login account has to be created before this Enable Non-CAC Login button is clicked for the user. To enable that non-CAC login, the user's email has to be recognizable to RMS, so that it needs to be entered for a created login account first. Non-CAC login users will be limited in what they can see and access in RMS, and those are all listed here. So in order to access any information that may contain PII or personally identifiable information, such as contractor payrolls, labor interviews, etc., users have to have up-to-date PII training completed. If the user has a CAC, that's going to be maintained through the yearly UPass required training system, so you won't need to enter the date for those, but for non-CAC login users or users who don't have a CAC, that date will need to be manually entered in there. I think I have a correction to something. Okay, so that this alternative DoD ID number is not 15 digits, 16, I've been told. So if the 10-digit doesn't work, try the 16-digit. Those are both on the back of the CAC. And then if neither of those work, like I said, let us know. Full district admins, sorry, I'm back on the PII training now. Any full district administrators will automatically be assigned the role of a PII admin as indicated by this PII admin checkbox. So if this user had full district administrator rights, this checkbox would be checked. If a government user doesn't have a CAC, the user must contact their district administrator and provide, or their PII admin if they know, if those are different and they know which one, and provide that PII training expiration date for entry into their staff record.
For this demonstration, I have an incomplete staff record open in RMS. The general information like the name, email address, and phone number have been added, as well as the office having been set. Next is the position title. To set this, click on the blue box, and it's going to bring up this lookup, which is going to pull from the District Office Position Titles module. Make the selection. And as I mentioned in the slides, signature blocks can be pretty important when it comes to finding a user throughout certain areas in RMS. So it's always a good idea to add at least one for a user. This information already entered by default is going to be pulled from the information entered in the staff record. So the name, and this is the position title that we selected. If needed, you can make updates for the signature block itself and click OK to confirm. Also, if needed, multiple signature blocks for the user can be added here as well. So I'm going to focus on these three boxes down here at the bottom, and this is where rights and permissions are going to be granted to the user. Starting with the district administrator rights box, this is where full or partial district administrator rights can be granted for the user if needed. And there's also some additional checkboxes here at the bottom. This district-wide read-only checkbox is going to give the user at least read-only permission to everything in the district. Each of the other permissions granted to the user, like contract user roles and office roles, will be checked, and the highest permission level will be applied. The next checkbox is the summary reports checkbox, and when this is checked, it's just going to give the user the ability to run summary reports regardless of any other permissions that they may have been granted. Also, when the summary reports checkbox is checked in the district administrator rights box, please note that checking this box for the user is going to allow that user to view all reports in the summary reports module regardless of their office or contract rights that have been applied. This means that the user will be able to see data for contracts and or offices that they do not have access to. So if they only need to be able to access the summary reports for their specific office, they should just be granted partial office administrator rights and then granted the summary reports permission within those rights. So now we'll go into the district administrator rights screen by clicking on this blue box. For now, it's showing as no district administrator rights since no checkboxes have been selected and the selected district administrator rights radio button is selected. If this person can be a full district administrator, this top radio button can be selected and all of the permissions listed here will have been granted. We can see that this has now been updated in the district admin rights box to reflect that full district administrator rights have been granted to the user. Also, when a user is a full district administrator, the PII admin checkbox is automatically going to be checked. Any user who is granted full district administrator rights will automatically be assigned the ability to perform as the PII admin for the district. As mentioned in the slides as well, non-CAC login users will have a field on their staff record where the PII expiration date can be entered, and the PII admin is going to be the users who can perform that. So if we go back in, I'm going to update this just to the selected district administrator rights, and I'm going to make the desired selections for only the permissions I want this user to have. And we'll go back. And we can see that this is changed to just reflect that partial district administrator rights have been granted to the user. So I'll go ahead and get rid of that real quick. When you get rid of district administrator rights, you will be asked to confirm by RMS. And we can see that this is reverted back to reflecting no district administrator rights. Next, in the office administrator rights box, check the Show All Offices checkbox to get the list of offices. I'm going to select the office that this user is assigned to. And similar to the District Administrator Rights Edit view, you can either select this top radio button to grant full Office Administrator rights, which is going to grant every permission listed here, or you can make the selected Office Administrator rights selection and only assign certain permissions. So back in the staff record, similar to, again, how the district administrator rights will show, when only selected permissions are provided, that's going to be reflected through this partial title here. And then if we go back in and select full office administrator rights, we can see that that's also changed to reflect full. Once again, I'll remove that, and once again, RMS will prompt you to confirm if office administrator rights are being removed from a user. Now, this next area is going to be for contract rights. This is by default going to be by office, and again, you'll need to select the Show All Offices checkbox, and you can select the office. You have the option to grant this user role, whichever one is selected, to all contracts in the office, or you can select this radio button here to only make certain selections of contracts within the office. So I'm going to go back. For this demonstration, I'm not going to set a user role. And we can see that since I didn't select a user role, no rights were granted to this user, even though I selected the contracts that I wanted them to have access to. Since I did not select a user role, no rights have been granted. Now I'll perform the same thing, but this time I will select a user role. So I'll just make a arbitrary selection. And I'll leave my selected contracts as well. And so this is what we want to see for contract rights. We want to see the user role that was selected, and this should say either selected or all contracts. Now, if we do the same with district-wide instead, if we just try and switch over, RMS will ask for confirmation since one existing office contract role for the staff record will be deleted if we switch. So I'll confirm by clicking yes. And as soon as you click the district-wide radio button, the district-wide contract user role screen is going to come up. And again, for this demonstration, I'm just going to go back to the staff record without making a selection. So it looks almost like something was granted for all contracts in the district, but since we do not see that user role title listed here, no rights have been granted to this user. This user cannot access all contracts district-wide since no user role has been selected. Now, if we go back in and make our selection, we're seeing what we want to see. The user role title is listed here, so that means that this user has access to all contracts district-wide under this user role selected. Once rights have been granted properly, the staff record can be linked to a login account. If doing so for a CAC login, click on this Link Staff Record button and enter the DoD ID number. And if you're enabling non-CAC login, enter the email address for login. Please note that a staff account should already have been created before this is attempted. RMS will need to find this email that you've entered, and so it will need to already exist in the system. Once that's been completed, the user should be able to log in and access the appropriate areas to perform the work they need to complete.
Moving on from the staff records, we'll just take a look at the contract user roles that can be entered by district administrators in the district office. This is important for the staff records, as we reviewed earlier. There's going to be two tabs shown here. So this is going to list all the user roles, and then in the linked staff tab over here, it's going to show each user role and then the users associated or linked to that user role. To be able to access and make updates in this area, you can be either a full district administrator, or you'll need at least partial district administrator rights with the district office contract user roles permission granted. When you're creating a user role, there are 3 levels of access for each contract user role, and the icons next to each specific permission will show accordingly. So the red X is going to be for no access at all, the yellow check mark is going to be read-only access, and the green check mark is read and write access. If a user role could be deleted, that can be done from this area as well. Before a user role can be deleted, though, all the affected users that are linked to that user role need to be assigned to a different role. RMS is, if you don't do that first, then RMS is going to give you this prompt letting you know that they're going to be moved into the administrative user role, unless you would like to do that otherwise. To back out, you'll just need to exit and change that yourself. Okay, so that is our overview of the district and office level contract preparation. I wanted to kind of take a pause here and check on any questions that we can get answered either verbally, or if there's unanswered questions in the Q&A. Looks good in the Q&A. If you have a question, if you'd like to raise your hand or unmute, I'll wait just a few minutes.
All right, it looks like we do have a question in the Q&A right now. Is there a way to set the default report type? If you're talking about in the contract level, I believe it is automatically set to one of the military options, I believe. But no, there's no way to set which one is going to be the default, because there's no guarantee that it's going to be a military or civil type one.
All right, so now we're going to go into the contract level and look at some prep that should be completed for a new contract once the district office and user and setup has all been achieved. Okay, so we'll begin again with the prime contractor setup, but this time within the contract. So once the prime contractor has been set up in the district office, it can now be added to contract. So you'll just find the contract in find the desired contract in the contract selection view if you're not already in it, and open the contract. And then under the administration tab in that contract, you can click on the prime contractor module. At a minimum, the prime contractor staff permission must be granted within the current user's assigned user role to be able to access this. To be able to add a prime contractor or edit and make any updates to a prime contractor, then that permission is going to need to be at the read and write access level. green check mark. This module exists in both government mode and contractor mode, but the data in the second section and down are primarily entered by the contractor. The top section is government entry only. The prime contractor name and information should be added to the prime contractors list in the district office, and then that'll be able to be selected in this selection box. A quick note on the payee office information that will need to be set here to be able to process payments on the contract. That information comes from CFMs though, not from RMS. So if you're adding this information to the prime contractor, you'll first need to make sure that the contract and delivery order numbers in contract description match those that are used in CFMs for the contract, which we will discuss this again later, but that will need to be done. And then also the contract setup CFMs database needs to be properly selected for the correct database. Sometimes this contract CFMs database is outside of the district it is assigned in, and that's really when you'll need to make sure that the contract setup CFMs database is set correctly. Otherwise, it's automatically going to be set to the district CFMs database. Once you verify all of that in contract description and contract setup, then a CFMs download is going to need to be performed in contract finances to get all the information from CFMs. You can also, if you have the time to wait, this information will automatically be updated overnight during the nightly download. So when you come back to the prime contractor to set the payee office, whether you do a CFMs download or you wait until the nightly download, that lookup field for the payee office will have the most updated data from CFMs, and you'll be able to select that for the prime contractor. Again, if any information is entered in these bottom sections within the contract level, that information will not backfill into the district office. So if that needs to be in both places, it'll need to be entered in both areas or just in the district office so that it carries into the contract. Okay, so we'll take a closer look at some of the fields up here in the government entry section. We've got the prevent, so the RMS 3 prime contractor where you select the actual prime contractor. The prevent contractor mode access button is going to prevent the contractor from accessing contractor mode for this contract. This is usually used when there's dispute, termination, or other reason to prevent access. The copy UEI and contractor information button is going to pull information from the district office, prime contractor information entered for this, and then it's going to pull it into the contract. The responsibility code for a prime contractor is always going to be PRIM, and that cannot be changed. As I kind of reviewed just a second ago, the payee office information comes from CFMs. And that'll need to be set here to be able to process payments from the contract, for the contract. So next in this section of the training, we'll move into the contractor staff tab for the prime contractor module. Any staff assigned to the prime contractor in this tab is going to have access to contracts that the prime contractor is assigned to if they are administrators or given a user role in those contracts. So as we covered earlier, it's usually the job of the USACE representative to assign the first contract staff member and make them an administrator. And then from that point forward, that administrator will add the additional staff to the prime contractor staff and then assign user roles in contractor mode. Please note that when adding the first administrator users, make sure that the account ID work email field is entered exactly as it is in the staff record for that user. If it is off by a single digit or a character, it's not going to work. So, and you won't be able to change it either once it's entered. You'll have to just create a new staff record with the correct email address. to avoid that, just go ahead and make sure that it's the same as the staff record. For the government, you'll need read and write access granted for the prime contractor module to add the first administrator users. It's easy for contractors to make all staff members in the prime contractor staff module tab. But this can be really dangerous, as administrators can remove, add staff, and modify all the contractors that the prime contractor has access to. So to avoid this, you should advise the contractor to set up user roles in contractor mode, and that'll allow limiting access and greater control over the data in the contract. And we will review that process as well. So we are going to review this as it's done in contractor mode. I know that all of you are probably government mode users, of course, but this is just so that this information can be relayed to contractors who may not be aware of this process, and just add every user, like I mentioned previously, as an admin. And that can have some negative effects, potentially. So, okay, so starting in the prime contractor's contract selection view in contractor mode, that first admin user that was added by the government is going to use the user roles module in contractor mode to create and or edit user roles that are going to be used in the contract. To access this, that admin user will need read and write access to both the prime contractor and contract access control module within their assigned user role. So when you go to add a user role, you'll just add a user role or a role title and confirm by clicking OK. This can still be changed in the edit view if needed. It's not a final entry or anything. So for each user role created, the permissions for all the different areas within a contract can be set here. This is going to be pretty similar to the user roles, the contract user roles in government mode. There are 3 levels to each permissions access. No access is signified by a red X. Read only is going to be the yellow check mark. And finally, the read and write access will show as a green check mark. You also have buttons up here to simplify setting these permissions. These are single access level buttons. So if you'd just like to assign all as no access, read only, or read and write, you can use those respective buttons at the top. Or the contractor can. After all the desired user roles have been created and set for the contract access control module will be the place in contractor mode where the administrative contractor will need to add users to the contract and assign their user roles, which they set up in the user roles module. This contract access control module is only available in contractor mode, so the contractor must do this if anyone does. Okay, so in order for these actions to take place properly, the users that need to be added into the contract access control module should also have been added first in the prime contractor staff tab as shown on this slide. So all of the staff members need to be added at least in this way. And that's because when you add users to the contract access control module, this staff email lookup is going to pull from the contractor staff tab in the prime contractor module. So if they're not entered there, they won't be able to be selected in the contract access control module. After you select the user, you can select the correct user role, and now that the user has been added to the contract, they will have the access specified in that user role within the contract. If a user needs access to more than one contract, then they will need to be added to each contract in this way.
For this demonstration, we'll open contractor mode in the contract selection view, and we'll go to the user roles module. In this module, you can add contract user roles that can be used for users within individual contracts. To add one, click on the Add button and enter a role title. Click OK to confirm. And when adding a user role, you'll be presented with this edit view where you can grant permissions for each individual area in RMS in a contract. These buttons at the top will allow you to set permissions at a single access level. So you can click here to assign all of these permissions as no access, click here for read only, and click here for read write. For this demonstration, I'll go ahead and click assign all as read only, and RMS will ask you to confirm. So as we can see by the yellow check marks, every permission in this user role has been granted at the read-only level. You can also select individual permissions and grant either more or less access individually. The green check mark will signify read and write access, and the red X will signify no access. Now that the user role has been created, it can be used to assign to a staff member within a contract. So now we'll go back to the contract selection view using the contract selection button, and we'll enter our contract. Under the Administration tab, go to the Contract Access Control module, and to add a staff member into the Contract Access Control, click on the Add button. To select a staff member, click on the blue box for the staff email lookup. Please note that this staff email lookup is going to pull from the Contractor Staff tab within the Prime Contractor module. So please first make sure that they're added there to be able to select them here. This will bring up a user lookup. And I'll select a staff member. And then in the contract user role field, we'll find our created user role, select and confirm by clicking OK, and confirm once more by clicking OK. So now this user does have access to this contract under this user role. If we double click on the user, we see here that the contract user role can also still be updated by clicking on the lookup. And you can also change the staff member assigned with a warning that this will overwrite the current user's permissions. If you'd like to proceed, click on Yes, and you will be able to select a new staff member. Please do consider the warning that's provided as it'll overwrite that user's permissions.
Okay, so if the contractor's been set up and assigned to everything properly, but they still can't see the prime contractor in their selection view when they log in, make sure that they're using this update button. When a user logs in for the first time, RMS will find the prime contractor they're assigned to and automatically add that to their selection list here. However, that may not always be the case with subsequent logins and subsequent access they receive to contracts. So clicking this button is going to make sure that whatever they've been added to since their first login, if that has not been updated yet, that's going to update with the update button.
Moving on from adding staff to contracts. Yes, that's what I want. Okay, we'll now look at the contract description and contract setup for new contracts. Okay, as I kind of touched on earlier, if the contract is going to use CFUMs, the first thing that needs to be entered in the contract is the contract number and the delivery order number exactly as they appear in CFUMs. This includes any dashes, spaces, or any other characters. Just make sure it matches exactly. If the contract and delivery order number combination doesn't match what's in CFUMS, a CFUMS download is attempted with those mismatching numbers, RMS is going to give you a message stating that no obligations were found. So that's why you need to make sure that they match exactly. This error will also occur if the CFUMS database chosen in contract setup is pointing to the wrong CFUMS database. The permissions needed to access this is going to be the contract description - general information defining contract and the contract description location / coordinates permissions. Of course, if they need to make edits and update, the read and write access level will be needed at a minimum to allow updating in this module. Okay, so for contract setup, I'm going to do an overview of all of the tabs available in this area, but discussing the specific settings found in each of these tabs, we've kind of broken up as it relates to the rest of the topics we're going to discuss. So we'll get further down into the information available in these tabs as we move forward. So, but real quick, an overview. The administration / funding tab is where you can identify the CFUMS, P2, and PCF links for the contract. Also, how you can determine how to track QC and which funding method is going to be used for payments. The payment / modifications tab is where you can identify the payment timeframes and signatures for modifications. The quality assurance tab is used to identify the quality assurance report type or types and the information regarding adverse weather delays, along with the quality team. The submittals / schedule tab is used to identify details for documentation review periods and submittal register setup. The contractor schedule type is also specified here. The dredging tab, of course, is going to be used to identify the contract as a dredging contract and enable all of the settings for that type of contract. And finally, the CUI tab is where you can address the CUI requirements for the contract. To access all the areas of contract setup, both the contract setup permissions in the user role have to be granted. There are 2 of them. So the first one is contract setup / action items and contract setup / security classifications permissions. Those both are going to allow you to read and write access level, will allow you to update the information in the contract setup tabs. Next, we'll look at the contract personnel for a contract. So along with the last couple of modules we reviewed, contract personnel can also be found under the administration tab from the contract menu as shown on this slide here. To access this module, the contract personnel permission will need to be granted in the user role for the logged in user who needs access. Okay, so this screen is where you can assign user roles for the key individuals involved in the execution of the contract, otherwise known as the project delivery team or PDT. There's 2 different parts to this screen. The top part is going to list the members currently in the project delivery team or PDT, and that's where you can add the staff members to the team, edit them, or delete them if needed. And the bottom part is going to list the contract personnel and their assigned contract user roles as set up in the RMS staff module or the contract access control module. So here we're showing the steps for adding a PDT member. I guess the question may come up like, who do I add to this? These teams typically include professionals involved in like the programming, planning, design, and or construction of the project. The size and composition of the project team will probably vary depending on the extent of the capital design and the construction budget and the various elements of the project. This is usually going to be dictated by the project owner. So to add a member, you just, as you do in many cases in RMS, you just add the add button, select your staff member, and when you get to the contract personnel edit view, If you need to change the staff member you selected, you can do that here. You can select the position title as well. And once you add a staff member, this team member active checkbox will automatically be checked. You can go ahead and add a date started for the date that this person started on the contract. And if you no longer need a member, you can enter a date finished and then uncheck the team member active button or checkbox. And then if the team member is no longer active and they can be deleted, that delete process is pretty straightforward. You just select the person and click on the delete button and confirm deletion.
For this demonstration, we'll start in a contract in RMS. And under the Administration tab, we'll go to the Contract Personnel module. So at the top, we have the project delivery team members, and at the bottom, we have the staff lookup that we will be able to select from. So if we click on Add, I'll add a staff member. If needed, while you're in the Contract Personnel screen, you can change the staff member again. And you can also select a position title. I'll make a selection and click OK to confirm. You'll notice these three fields here below, the team member active, the date started, and the date finished field. So let's say I'm adding this staff member for the first time. I'll go ahead and leave the team member active checkbox selected, which is by default. And I'll add a date started. So this signifies the date that the staff member started on the contract. And let's say that this team member is no longer active on the contract. We can enter a date they finished and deselect the team member active checkbox. If we go back, they have been added to the project delivery team members, but they are showing as inactive. So if we wanted to delete that, we'll go ahead and select it, click delete, and confirm the deletion.
All right, next we are looking at P2 linking at the contract level. So once everything is set up as we reviewed for P2 and the office description previously, once all the P2 org codes and P2 linking is correct at the office level, P2 linking can be performed within the contract itself. To access this, the administration P2 projects permission will be needed to access this module for the user's user role. If you're updating or changing information in here, you'll need the permission level to be at the read and write access level. Green check mark again. So when clicking on the add button, the lookup will default to the current office. It will not default to the sub office, but it will default to the current office that the contract is in. But if you can't find it through that way, you can click on the all offices tile and it should be there. If you still cannot find the correct project after going to the all offices tile, make sure that all of the necessary requirements in RMS at the office level and in P2 are set up correctly. And if you verify everything is set up correctly and it's still not showing up, you will need to contact the help desk and we should be able to help you out. Okay, once the linking has been verified at the contract level, this view of the P2 projects module is going to update to display the information that's been pulled from P2. The fields in this view will show all the information imported directly from there. Everything in these tabs down at the bottom is all going to be information from P2, so just keep that in mind. Okay, and that's it for the P2 linking at the contract level. Real quick, I will check in on questions. Looks like we're clear. If there's any verbal questions that can be asked, I'll wait a minute or something and then move on. Our next contract level contract prep section is going to be the finances prep for new contracts, specifically the contractor payrolls. So for the sake of this training, we're not going to be covering all of the financial setup for RMS contracts. We did have a session back in October where we covered a lot of the financial information and process in RMS in a lot of detail. So we've added that link here. These are the topics that were discussed within that session. This is available on our YouTube channel. Instead, for this session, we're going to cover contractor payrolls, which was not covered in this session, this last session previously. So if you have further questions about any of the topics listed here, please go ahead and go see that video from our last session. Okay, so I wanna caveat this slide placement a little bit. This slide is a little bit out of order, but this is to show that payrolls for a contract to start, the kickoff for those to start is going to be setting the NTP acknowledged actual date. This is done in the milestone schedule module. And to be able to access this, the milestone schedules permission will need to be granted in the user's user role. And then, of course, to update the date, you'll need the access level will need to be at read and write. So once the NTP acknowledged date has been entered here, payrolls for the contract will begin. So that's sort of why we placed this first here. But let's rewind a little bit. Before the NTP acknowledged date is entered, the track contractor payrolls in RMS checkbox needs to be checked in contract setup for the contract under the administration/funding tab. So this checkbox here, that needs to be checked for just the contract in general to be able to start generating payrolls. With that checkbox, you can also specify a milestone at which point the payrolls will stop generating. You can edit this and edit this more and add days further out beyond that milestone date, or you can add a negative value to specify a certain amount of days before that milestone's date. So government users with the read-write permissions can also update the grace period in the days field, as I just explained there for the milestone's actual date. Those same users can also update the contractor payrolls module by going into the module. RMS is going to automatically add any missing payroll dates if the criteria is satisfied. A quick note, government users with an email and password login rather than a CAC login, you will need the proof of completed PII training submitted and that date entered in the staff record for you to be able to for them to be able to access the contractor payrolls module. Okay, if the payroll is to be tracked for the prime contractor, the government has to be the one to check that track payroll or payroll required ? Checkbox in the prime contractor. The contractor cannot change this field. That's got to be by the government. And then the government cannot set the payroll's ending day of week field as shown here. That will be the responsibility of the contractor. The contractor will need to be advised on that prior to submitting the first payroll. So before doing that, they should enter the ending day of week. By default, RMS is going to set this to a Saturday. If that works for you and the contract, then that it doesn't need to be set. But if it does need to be changed, then that can be done here in the prime contractor module by the contractor. Now, whenever the payroll ending day of week has been entered, this use last day as payroll and override checkbox can be used to override the ending day of week set. So an example of that would be, let's say the ending day of week is set to Sunday, but the last day on site is a Friday. Using this checkbox will allow that last day on site to be Friday rather than Sunday, or the payroll's ending day of week will be switched to that Friday since it's the last day on site instead of Sunday as set. So that checkbox will override that. the contractor will need contractor payroll and prime contractor read and write permissions to enter this payroll information. Okay, so for subcontractor payrolls, in the subcontractors module, this data can only be entered by the contractor. The government should advise their contractor to complete this information prior to submitting any payrolls, including marking a payroll as a non-work week. The first and the last day on site for the subcontractor can be updated here in the subcontractors module, which can be found under the administration tab, and it can also be updated in the contractors on site module, which I think we show in the next slide, also under the administration tab. But the prime contractors days on site can only be set in the contractors on site module, which you can also access from the contractor payrolls module, but that can only be set by the government in the contractors on site module. So the government users that can enter the first and last day on site for a prime contractor will need the contractor payrolls read and write permission, and they will be able to update the prime contractor days on site. Okay, so here is the contractors on site module in contractor mode. So the government has entered the first day on site. So for contractor payrolls to be generated, a contractor with administrative permissions has to open the contractor payrolls module. Once that user with the correct permissions has opened that module, RMS is going to automatically add all the payrolls that meet that criteria for payroll settings set properly. Contractor users who want the ability or who need the ability to update the payroll settings for subcontractors in either the contractors on site module or in the subcontractors module will need the associated permissions. So depending on the information that that user will be responsible for entering, they can either have one or the other permissions for the contractors on site module or the subcontractors module, or they can just be granted both of those and they'll be able to enter the information in either areas.
For this demonstration, we'll look at a contract in both government and contractor mode to show what needs to be prepared on both sides in order to start generating contractor payrolls for the contract in RMS. So first, we'll start in the contract in government mode. And one of the first things we're going to want to check is under the administration tab in the contract setup module. So what we're going to want to check is the track contractor payrolls in RMS checkbox. For the contract to generate contractor payrolls in general, this checkbox does need to be checked. The two fields below it can specify which day the payrolls will end on. You can use one of the milestones in this dropdown. This is currently set at the contract physical completion milestone. And this value in the days field shows that that's going to be 10 days after the milestone's date for the contractor payrolls to end. If we wanted to change this to be 10 days before the contract physical completion date, then we would add a negative. And now these payrolls are set to end 10 days before the contract physical completion milestone date. So we'll go back to the contract menu. And the next thing we're going to want to check is in the prime contractor module. For the prime contractor to have payroll generated, this checkbox at the bottom, payroll required, is going to need to be checked. The payroll's ending day of week can only be entered in contractor mode, so the contractor will be entering that, and I'll show that in contractor mode. The bottom checkbox, use last day as payroll and override, is going to be used to use the last day on site to override the ending day of week selected here. For example, if this was set to Sunday, but the last day on site is actually a Thursday, if you select this checkbox, then the payrolls will end on that Thursday, instead of on the Sunday selected here. Okay, next, also in government mode, we're going to want to check the milestone schedule under the Schedules tab. We can see that the NTP acknowledged has a scheduled date, but in order for the contractor payrolls to start generating, an actual date must be entered. So we'll do that now. And go back. Next, we'll look at contractor mode. Next up, in the same contract in contractor mode, the first thing we're going to do is enter the prime contractor module so that we can enter the payrolls ending day of week. Looks like this is already set to Saturday, but I'm going to go ahead and update it to Sunday. If a day is never entered in this field and it shows as blank, the default payrolls ending day of week that RMS is going to set for the payrolls is going to be Saturday. And then I'll go ahead and check this use last day as payroll and override checkbox, just in case the last day on site is a different day than Sunday. Now that that's set for the prime contractor, we'll next go into the subcontractors module. Here we've got our subcontractors that have been entered. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and make sure that each one has this payroll required checkbox checked, the payrolls ending day of week set, and if needed, the use last day as payroll and override. There may be differences for the payroll settings for subcontractors in the contract, but for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to make sure that they all have these same settings. I'll enter our next one. Yes, it's the same. Next one. Yes, it's the same as well. And this is also the same. So as we can see up here, this subcontractor does have the first day on site date set. And these can be set in the subcontractors module for each subcontractor if needed. Another area where you can set those dates is going to be the contractors on site module. Here you can just select the first day or last day field in the column and select the date you'd like to enter. Please keep in mind that the first and last days on site for the subcontractors can only be entered in contractor mode. For the prime contractor, the first and last day on site can be entered by either the government or the contractor. So I'll go ahead and set these dates as well. And then I'll go back to the contract menu. So in government mode, we verified the setting under contract setup for tracking payrolls in RMS, along with the ending payroll milestone. We also made sure that an actual date was entered for the NTP acknowledged milestone, and we made sure to check the payroll required checkbox for the prime contractor. In contractor mode, we made sure to enter the payrolls ending day of week for the prime contractor and set the payroll required checkbox as selected on the subcontractors that need payrolls generated. In our case, it was all of them. And we also made sure that the first and last days on site are entered for the subcontractors and the prime contractor. So whenever an administrator user, like as I've been playing the role in this demo, opens the contractor payrolls, the payrolls should be generated for all of the subcontractors and prime contractors that you've entered into the contractors on site module for those dates that were entered for the first and last days on site for both the subcontractors and the prime contractors.
Okay, so that's all for the contractor payrolls section. Moving on, we're going to look at the RMS to PCF process and what to do to prepare. for documentation to be moved between those. So what is PCF? I think I've reviewed this a few times before, so you may recognize this already. Paperless contract file is a secure web-based application designed and certified to store official contract files as required per FAR subpart 4.8. As a web-based records management application, it is not approved for any classified information. No classified information should be uploaded into RMS or sent to PCF in any way. So please adhere to that policy. RMS has a one-way data flow to PCF. So that means that any documents generated in RMS are sent to PCF. It does not work the other way around. PCF is the required repository for all official contract documentation, and contract file documents are automatically placed in the appropriate PCF folder upon adding. Okay, so how and when PCF works. Typically, documents uploaded to the document packages are set to send to PCF once that document package has been completed. Once the documents are set to send to PCF as indicated by that document ready to send status, it can take 1 to 3 business days before arriving in PCF, and that's based off of a few requirements that the documents have to go through. So first, how documents send to PCF. It's going to be first in, first out. The first document packages will be completed, will get sent first. Also, though, government documents in government document packages will be sent. They'll take priority over the contractor or shared document packages documents. And also, RMS can only send 300 documents per district per night to PCF. So depending on how much is already in the queue, it may take a little longer for your documents to get there, or if there's nothing in the queue, then it may not take much time at all. So please allow for those considerations before you see that something's missing in PCF. Make sure that it's not just a little delayed. This is a flow chart, essentially, of what I just explained, just in a more detailed visual representation. This is primarily for your reference, and if you needed to print out, this is available in the slides. Okay. Okay, so getting documents from RMS to PCF. While some document packages have different completion requirements, most are going to require the manual completion independent from the work completed in the associated module. So an example of this type would be a QC daily report. Once the QC daily report is completed, the document package remains open. This is so that the users can sign and add any further documents to the package prior to completion. Once the QC daily report is completed, the government user will need to open the document package and click on the complete package button. So that's kind of the manual document completion, document package completion that gets documents from RMS to PCF. All right. Other document packages, as listed here at the bottom, are the exceptions to that. And that is whenever those document packages are completed when the work in the associated module attached to them is completed. So essentially, these document packages are dependent on their parent module. For the QA daily reports, this is only going to be the case when using the multi-sign feature. Otherwise, it's going to be a manual completion. But if using the multi-sign feature, once the daily report has been signed for the second time by the project engineer, the document package will be marked as completed automatically. And the documents will be sent to PCF. All right. So this is the second way to get documents to PCF aside from document package completion. This method will set all documents in the contract file for a contract to the document ready to send status before getting sent to PCF. Please note, this is probably best practice to perform this only once the contract has been completed. When you start to perform this action, RMS is going to display the number of documents affected and prompt the user performing this action to proceed. Once all the documents have been sent to that document ready to send status, it, as I mentioned previously, may take anywhere from 1 to 5 days for all documents to show up in PCF based on the number of documents already in the queue for the district. Only users with full district administrator rights can perform this action. So only full district admins will be able to use this send all documents to PCF button. This feature is helpful for district admins responsible for closing out contracts, and perhaps those contracts have multiple files that were not properly sent to PCF. This could be due to perhaps a stand-in user working on a contract for only part of the contract. And if they don't normally work on items that require accepting and completing the document packages, they may unintentionally be ignoring clicking on that accept package button for any and all the items they review. And when this happens, those documents sort of just sit in a limbo where they're never sent to PCF, but they have already been reviewed. Eventually, someone will have to later accept those document packages to send them all to PCF. So this button streamlines that process a little bit. Again, in order to perform this function, the user has to be a full district administrator. And so this is the third way to get documents to PCF. So I'll use that same use case I mentioned in the last slide. A user was working on a contract and accidentally missed accepting the document packages. Well, let's say that user was working on 10 different contracts doing that, or 5 even. Now, whoever is responsible for closing out those contracts with all those unsent documents, instead of having to go into each and every contract and click on that send all documents to PCF, the district admin can come in the district office and use the send documents to PCF button instead. This is going to allow them to select whichever contracts have unsent documents and send those by multiple contracts at a time instead of individually for each contract. Once you make your selections, RMS is going to let you know how many documents were impacted, and you can confirm by clicking OK. Again, the PCF process is a nightly event. During this event, RMS is going to cycle through each district and send only 300 documents from that district to PCF before moving on to the next district. All right. Okay, here we have all of the PCF statuses that can be shown for documents in the contract file screen. We're showing the statuses that are prior to being sent, kind of in process, and then we've got the error sending to PCF interpreted errors listed down here with some guidance on where those can be resolved. Again, that's more for your reference, so it'll be in the slides for you to refer back to. Okay, just real quick, we'll touch on the CUI stuff and as it relates to documentation in the contract. This can be set up in the contract setup modules, in the CUI tab. This is used to set the security classifications for documentation within the contract. If the contract meets the requirements found in DoD instruction 5200.48, you'll need to select yes. Otherwise, just leave the default setting to no and move on. If you select yes, you'll need to specify what level of CUI is within the contract, either whole or in part. And then down here at the bottom, if you want to change the default CUI markings, which is just controlled unclassified information, you can do that here. So depending on how the contract CUI settings are set, this is a view from the contract reports screen. If it's CUI in whole, then this print security markings header and footer checkbox is going to be automatically checked and cannot be edited. And then if it's just in part, this checkbox will be there and you will have the option to edit that. Okay, next we'll move on to the submittal and transmittal setup for a contract. So if your contract needs to have multiple registers, those can be added in the contract setup module in the submittals /schedule tab. You can do that by clicking on the add button in the submittal register list grid, and you'll just enter a title for the submittal register and click on OK. New registers can be added for a contract at any time during the contract. This doesn't need to be initially done or anything like that. It can be added at any point during the contract. Okay, so here we have some additional submittal settings available in this contract setup area. So first, the compute submittal need dates on activity schedule. That checkbox can be used to have RMS automatically calculate the submittal register dates using the scheduled activity dates. If this box isn't checked, the contractor is going to have to manually calculate and enter those dates for the submittals. If these numbers are entered before submittal items are added, then the previously added submittal items will not update with these changes made in contract setup. So if possible, make sure that these values are set before a mass of submittals is added to the contract. A quick note on the variation review period field. This field is going to, whatever value is entered in this field is going to supersede any of the other review periods set here if that variation checkbox is checked on a transmittal for a submittal item. Those are the settings for submittals that are within contract setup. So now we'll look at getting submittals into the contract and how to prepare for that. So to prepare for getting submittals into the contract, all the required specification sections are going to need to be added to the specification sections module, and all the required submittal items are going to need to be added to the submittal register module. Okay, so there's two ways to get this done. You can either manually enter the specification sections and then add all of the submittal items manually after that, or the preferred method, because it's much faster and easier, is going to be through an import. Okay, so there are two ways to import. There's an import submittal register specs intact option, and then also an import submittal register Excel option. If the number of submittal items needed is considerably larger, using one of these two import options is going to save time and effort with getting your contract ready to start sending submittals. Out of these two methods, specs intact is definitely the preferred method. It's just a little bit quicker and easier. You have to do some input and entry for the Excel option, which we'll review. So a little more background on Specs Intact here. Specs Intact is a free software available to contracts via either of these links here. The top one is going to be available for contractors, and the second link here is going to be available to government users, not contractors. So exported TXT files of a Specs Intact file can be used to import information into the RMS submittal registers. Okay, so starting with the import Specs Intact method, either the contractor or government can perform this import. First thing you'll need to do is export the Specs Intact file to a .txt file, and then saving that file will be able to will allow you to add it into RMS. Okay, Like I mentioned, this can be done by contractor or the government. District policy and the way the contract specs are set up is going to dictate that decision. So keep that in mind. After selecting a specs intact file to import into RMS, this is the screen you'll be presented with prior to completing the import. If there are multiple registers, you can select which one to import into using this button. It's going to default to just the register 1. You can also review the information that's being imported using the tabs here at the bottom. You can look at the submittal items that are coming in, the sections, the reviewers, and then the specs intact file is just going to show the raw specs intact data file. Once everything's been reviewed, if the contractor is performing the import, then they will have to request acceptance to import using this button. If the government is performing the import, they will have this request acceptance to import button, but then they'll also have additional buttons here to accept or reject the import as soon as they click on that. The only difference is that contractor will need to get acceptance from the government. The government can accept on their own. So here we're showing that the government will need to accept the import before the import can be completed. If the contractor is doing that, then the file will show as acceptance requested, and then they'll go in and be able to approve or reject. 2 things to note here. Like I mentioned, if the government is responsible for importing the submittal register, they can upload the file, request acceptance, and approve acceptance and import the data all in the same session. District administrators will also have the option to override the submittal registers if you upload or enter the incorrect data and there have been no transmittals started yet or finished in the transmittal log. Then you can get the district admin to come in here and overwrite the submittal register with the correct information. So once the file has been accepted for import, that can be done by merging into the register and then finally clicking on the import data as shown button. That'll complete the import. And now next for the Excel submittal import, this one's a little more involved than the specs intact import. You can't just like use an exported file. You'll need to download the template if you need it or don't already have it maybe saved already. You'll need to extract the files from the download. Make sure that you do this. If you don't, Windows doesn't really work properly with unextracted files when performing this. So make sure you extract the files, open the template, and before you're starting your input, save that file under a name relevant to the project first, and then you can start entering data within it. When you're importing submittals in this way, this is the template that is used for that operation. So the main very important requirement to allow the import is going to be number 1 here. This contract number must be entered for the import to work, period. And the contract number also must match the contract that is being imported into. If that number does not match the contract you're trying to import into, it will not work. And then, all right, number 2, you can enter the delivery order number, contract title, and then starting at cell A8, you can start filling in for each submittal item. Please note that if there are any blank rows in this section here, RMS is going to ignore that and the rest of the data past those blank rows in the Excel import file. So make sure that there are no blanks in these 3 columns here. And then in columns D through double A. Oh, I apologize. Okay, correction. Only column A must have no blanks. So that this column here, none of these can be blank. Even if you have to repeat the section number, there must be values in every row for the entire sheet to be imported into the contract. And then in rows D through AA, you can put a single X in any of the settings that apply for each submittal item. Okay, so once everything's been entered into that template and it's been saved onto your computer, you can now add it into RMS as shown here. Make sure to close the Excel file before doing this. If it's not closed, RMS will not allow the import. So make sure it's saved and closed. And then, as I mentioned previously, if the contract number entered in the template does not match the number in the contract you're importing into, RMS will not allow the import to move forward. So the rest of this process is going to be pretty much the same as the specs intact import with a few slight differences. The government is responsible for importing. If the government is responsible for importing the submittal register, again, they can upload the file, request acceptance, approve acceptance, and import the data all in the same session. If the contractor is requesting acceptance from the government, then they'll have to work together to approve or reject, review, and get those done and merged into the submittal register. Again, same here, district administrators will have the option to overwrite the submittal registers, but only do this if there was a mistake made, no transmittals have been started and finished in the transmittal log, and everything can be overwritten to get it replaced. So for both of these import methods, the import-export permission for submittal register import specs intact / Excel permission will be needed at the read and write level to perform any of these actions. And the same will go for government users, in addition to if they want the capability to accept or reject the import submittals from contractor permission will need to be granted in their user role, and that will need to be read and write access, and they'll be able to accept or reject imports either from the contractor or for themselves. Okay, once everything's been reviewed for the import, it can now be completed just as it was in the specs intact file by clicking on the import data as shown button up there. If there are duplicates found in the import file, RMS will prompt you to take care of those in a window shown here, where you can select the items to import anyways, or you can leave them unchecked to ignore the duplicates. Check them to include them anyways, uncheck or leave them unchecked to ignore the duplicates and keep them out of the import. For this demonstration, I'm also going to use contractor mode to perform the import through the Excel method, but as with the specs intact, this can also be done in government mode. So we'll select the import submittal register Excel module, and if you need the template, click on the download template button. This will download a zip file to the computer. Once that's been downloaded, right click on the zip file and choose to extract all files, and then select a destination to extract those files to. The files included in the zip file is going to be a template file, which is empty, and then a sample template file, which can be used for reference. Here we have an import file ready to be worked on, which is saved under a name associated to the project. So when we open the template file, the first thing we're going to want to verify is the delivery order number and the contract number. These are the most important numbers in this template file. These must be entered for the import to be successful, and the contract number must match the contract number for the contract. Enter the title and location, and then starting at cell 8, you're going to start entering information for the actual submittal items. The first 3 columns are going to be typed in for the information that should be added, and then the next set of columns is going to require an X to be marked under the desired setting to set for the submittal item. After your input has been completed, make sure to save the template file, and then also make sure to close the template file before performing the import. Once that file has been saved and closed, click on the Add button to find that file and open it in RMS. Similar to the specs intact import, the import preview is going to give you a listing of everything that's going to be imported into the contract. Since we're in contractor mode, we'll have to request acceptance to import from the government. If the government performs the import, they can accept requestance to import and accept the import all in the same session. For the sake of this demonstration, I'll just keep showing the contractor mode screen. And so now that our file has been accepted for import, we can double click on it again, re-review the information to verify. Then when we're ready to import, we can click on the Merge into Register button. Another import preview will be shown to do a final verification of the information. And once that's been completed, click on the Import Data as Shown button. Authentication will be required for this action as well, and confirm. And once that's been completed, the Excel Import Complete confirmation screen will be shown and the items will be added to the contract. Okay, quick look at this specifications sections module. A submittal register for a contract can also be set up using this module. All of these sections can be manually entered for each one, or you can use one of the electronic formats available in RMS for the master format libraries. Here, this is how you manually add just a single section. The contract specifications sections permission will be needed and granted to the user role of the user performing this at the read and write access level to access and update this module. And this is showing how to add the sections provided libraries. You can select which sections you'd like to add based on the library selected, or you can make individual selections or select all. Keep in mind that while this option is faster, if you have a larger number of submittal items to add to the submittal register, it still may be better to import using the specs intact or Excel method. For this demonstration, we'll open a contract in RMS and go to the Submittals tab and select the Specification Sections module. To add a specification section, you can either select Manually Add New Section, and that's going to allow you to add a single specification section. For the section number, it should be entered in this format. And then provide a name for the section. Click OK to confirm. In the specification edit view, if needed, the name of the section can be updated once more. Now, if you'd like to add a library, select one of the master format libraries. I'll select 2004. And when you select a library, a lookup for all of the sections within that library is going to be provided. You can either make individual selections as shown here with the checkboxes, or using the checkbox at the top, you can select all the sections to copy into the contract. Click OK to confirm. And once that's completed, all of the sections from the library selected will have been added to the contract. Okay, here we're showing the submittal selection view. You can double click on an item here or and select it and click on the edit button to edit anything if needed. You can also add a submittal manually if it was not included in an import file. And this is showing the addition of that submittal item. The item number will automatically be assigned, but it can be overwritten. And then to finish, of course, you'll click finish. Please note most of these fields are filled in automatically if the import option is used. The government will need to enter the days to review if it's not already set in contract setup, and they'll also need to assign a primary government reviewer. Those are the government only entry fields. If the required for activity field is not set and the government accepted a transmittal from the contractor prior to sending any submittal items to the government, you'll want to make sure that this is all set correctly before accepting the transmittal. Once a submittal's transmittal has been accepted, the screen for editing submittal items will be locked and read-only after the transmittal has been accepted. So keep that in mind. So now we're essentially reviewing each of the fields in the submittal item edit view, starting with the description field. You can just enter a brief description, limited at 40 characters for the item. Again, the required for activity field is used to link submittals to activities. The dates for the activity will determine the submittal due dates. If the submittal item isn't linked to an activity, there will be no submittal due date. And also, if the activity linked to the submittal does not have a date entered into it, then there will also be no submittal due date. So just keep that in mind. Depending on the contract setup, the start date field will either be active for editing with manually entered submittal due dates, or RMS will automatically populate this date with the activity start date of the linked activity to the submittal item. The fields here that I want to touch on specifically are going to be 5 and 6, lag plus, lead negative, and procurement period. So these values are going to calculate the materials needed by and the approval needed by dates shown in the ENG 4028 report or the Submittal Register report. All right, and this is the rest of the fields for the submittal item edit view. If the Excel template was used, this classification should have been entered within that template. The review periods will be pulled in from contract setup. The days to review field available in government mode is going to overwrite the review period set in contract setup if it differs from there. Moving on, we're going to look at the grid edit view in the submittal register. This is really nice for entering information for a lot of items. This is showing the government mode view of the grid edit view. Again, the start date will only be able to be edited if the contract setup is set that way with manually entered submittal due dates. In the grid edit view, you can edit anything that is not shaded as right here. The section and item number cannot be edited, I don't think, ever. So otherwise, the unshaded areas will be able to be updated. Here are the differences between the grid edit view for government mode and for contractor mode, with contractor mode at the top. After making all of the changes needed for all of the items, the Save Changes button must be clicked, and then to return back to the submittal register, click on the back button. To be able to make any edits to submittal items or to add or to make changes to submittal items, the read-write permission for submittal register will need to be granted for the user role being used.
For this demonstration, we're going to look at manually adding a submittal item to a contract. So we've got our contract open here, and we'll go to the Submittals tab and enter the Submittal Register module. So we already have some submittal items entered here, but to add one manually, either due to it being left out of a submittal register import file or due to just the manual setup of specification sections and submittal items, that can be done by clicking on the Add button. Specification sections will need to be added to the contract in order to select from them. So I'll make our selection and click Next. If needed, the item number and item number extension can be edited in this screen. I'll click Finish. And that's going to bring us to the submittal item edit view. I'll go ahead and enter a description. And the rest of these fields can be filled out as described in the slides. Since we're in government mode, the days to review field and the primary government reviewer fields will both be read only in contractor mode. Those can only be edited within government mode. So let's go back to the submittal register. And let's say that multiple submittal items are in need of updates. That can be done by clicking on the Grid Edit button, which is going to bring up the Grid Edit view for all of the submittal items. Please keep in mind there is a scroll bar down here, just in case all of the columns are not showing completely. Within the Grid Edit view, all of the unshaded areas are going to be editable as long as you double click in them. Some areas are going to be accompanied with a lookup, like the required for activity, the submittal types, and the reviewer fields. Others are just typed in as they are in the submittal item edit view, like these fields here. And then the classification drop-down menu is going to be available for updates there. So I'll go ahead and make numerous updates here. And once I've finished making all of the updates, I'll make sure to click on this Save Changes button. This is going to commit all of the changes you've made to the submittal items. Clicking on the back button will not save any changes, so make sure that you're clicking the Save Changes button first. So once I've clicked that, we'll go back, and all of the changes will come down to the submittal items from those made in the Grid Edit view.
Moving on from submittals, we'll look at the QA/QC setup for a contract, starting with the contract setup information. In the quality assurance tab, the QA team responsible for day-to-day monitoring of the contract can be determined, and the QA daily report type, measurement units, and border wall contract parameters can be identified here also. As we reviewed previously, the report types can be added as needed for the contract in the district library QA/QC report types module. The next section will be for determining the number of days in the month that adverse weather could have an impact on the work progress. This should be determined in the actual contract, but this is just a prediction so that RMS can accurately calculate certain modules as it relates to QA daily weather, to daily reports and weather delays. These values are not absolutes either, so they may be updated if needed. This tab is also used to determine whether the contractor is due an extension due to unusually severe weather. The permission needed for accessing and making updates here will be the contract setup / action items permission at the read and write access level. The contract setup, contract security classification permission will not be needed in this case. So next we have the dredging tab. This tab only applies to contracts that are specifically identified as dredging contracts. Checking the track dredging information in RMS for the contract will determine this as a dredging contract. All right. And then the rest of that information can be filled as needed. The dredging report section is used to specify the types of QC daily report the contract must complete for the contract. The selections here will be pulled from the QA/QC reports module in the district library. Or district library, yes. The permission needed for this tab will be the same as the quality assurance tab. You'll need the contract setup / action items permission at the read and write access level. So QA daily reports are generated when the QA visits the construction site, and QC daily reports are generated when the contractors enter the status of ongoing and completed work control activities. Okay, we just have a few more slides to review. I know I'm a little past my time, but we're almost finished. So finally, we're going to look at the final topic in contract prep at the contract level, which is going to be this schedules setup. So we'll look at contract setup. The submittals / schedule tab allows setting which type of schedule is going to be used by the contractor in the contract. Schedule start and finish finish dates can be entered manually, but depending on the contract and the district policies and office procedures, if the early and late dates need to be captured, then that import early and late start/finish dates option should be used instead of the manually entered dates. That's the only way to capture those early, late, start, finish dates. So when that option is selected, another checkbox will appear for requiring the contractor to use actual start and finish dates from the QC reports on the NOS. You can use that to force the contractor to use the QC daily reports to log and enter actual start and actual finish dates for each activity individually instead of pulling that information from the contractor's schedule. Okay, so when this checkbox is checked, like I said, the RMS is going to ignore the actual start and finish dates in the contractor schedules, and those dates will not be imported when a schedule import is performed. Only the scheduled dates will be imported when this box is checked. When this checkbox is checked, be sure to advise the contractor of this requirement to ensure coordination between the authors and schedulers, the authors of the QC daily report and the schedulers for the contract. The same contract setup / action items permission at the read and write access level will be needed for updating the information we just reviewed here. All right, and that concludes our session today. Apologies for going a few minutes over, but here are some video references that we found may be helpful as it relates to the topics we reviewed. These are our previous Train the Trainer session videos, our most recent ones, and then here are our release training and brown bag videos, and then we've also got some module training videos that aren't really tied to a type of training or anything, just some informational ones. We've got a lot of those listed here. And finally, we also added those two Specs and Tech download links that we included in the slides as well. And we've also got the helpful links down here for our website, our YouTube channel, our help desk, Jira Service Desk link, the help desk call number, and the KM portal link. Okay, and that ends our presentation portion of this training. If there are any questions, we'll get those answered either verbally or in the Q&A section. I don't know if I see any.
We don't actually have any in the Q&A, but I do want to add 3 other points to the training that we may have glossed over. The first one is when you're in the prime contractor module in the district office, that home address, you can pull that information from the CAR and the award package. So keep that in mind. You can pull it from there. The other thing that you should know, when you have contract rights set as read-only, this goes for both contractor and government. Anytime it's in a specific module and they only have read-only, if they go to open up a document in that document package, it is not going to open up in an editable program. So if it's a PDF, it will not open up in Bluebeam or Adobe. If it's an Excel file, it's not going to open up in Excel. It's only going to open up in the RMS reader at the time because they have read-only permissions and not edit permissions. So keep that in mind. The last thing that I want to touch on is for the contractor payrolls. So in contract setup, where you have the option to define which milestone is going to stop contractor payrolls from generating, if you don't actually have that selected, then by default, RMS is going to use the actual date for contract final payment, and that's when it's going to stop it. So keep that in mind. If you don't set it, it's okay. Just know that as soon as contractor final payment actual date is entered when the final payment goes through, no more payrolls are going to be generated at that time. Other than that, I think we'll go ahead and open it up for a couple of minutes. If there's a lot of questions, we'll stay on and answer those questions. Otherwise, we'll hang on for a couple minutes and see if you have any other questions. And I'll open up the floor. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you have questions.
All right, I think we are good on questions. So we'll go ahead and close this out. Thank you all so much for attending, and thank you to the RMS support for all the questions. And like I said, we'll get this video up on our YouTube channel within 5 business days after this training. And we'll also include any questions that were in the Q&A in the updated slides. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.